Hello friends, we'll be understanding the meaning and definition of royalty accounts. So now when we understand about royalty, the word royalty and the introduction to its term, or rather the terminologies, will be something that will be explained in this video. Now, basically royalty means something that has been owned by you, or rather is being used by someone else, and you are getting the money for the property, or rather anything that is owned by you. Let's take an example. If you have published a book and that book is being published, or rather that book is being circulated to different parts of the world, now whatever money you get on that amount, or rather the sales, I'm not talking about, but over and above the sales, whatever amount you get is the royalty. Let's take another example. You have a property of your own. Now if you rent it, that means you are getting that rent. Now that is an income for you, but that cannot be called as royalty. However, if you're using a property and that property has been given to a builder, and that builder goes ahead and makes a bigger property on that, or rather anything which is bigger as compared to the earlier size, but now that property was able to be built up only because you gave up your land. So whatever amount you get, or whatever amount you get on that thing, is known as royalty. The next example that we can give is when you design a car, or rather when you have a car design with you, and then you send out those details to a car manufacturing company. So whatever details have been done by you, or whatever design has been provided to by them, or rather it has been provided by you to them, in such a scenario, whenever you claim for an amount for them on any amount of sales, that means if 25% of that amount of whatever sales has been done by that company because of that design, whatever sale comes, if you ask 25% of it apart from the fees that you have already taken for the design, that additional 25% will be termed as royalty. Now, to define, or rather to give you more example of this, let us jot down certain details on this. So there are three meanings that we have mentioned here. Rather, there are three possibilities, or rather we can say three parameters of royalty here. First, it is a periodic payment. Now it can be either annually, it can be either semi-annual, it can be either monthly, it can be at weekly, or any kind of periodic payment that has been decided as per the agreement. It is made by one person to another. That means these two people that will be a part of this specific royalty chapter will be lessor and lessee. Now, the term lessor and lessee will be explained later. Let's hop on to the next parameter. For using the rights of one person. Now here we'll explain you about lessor and lessee. Now lessor is the person who has the rights, or rather we can talk about lessee is one such person who has the rights, and lessee is giving his rights to the lessor for usage. So to give you a brief description, lessee is one person who has the rights in his name, and if those rights are being used by someone else, that person will be called as lessor. So here, lessee will get a periodic payment, and that will be for the usage of rights what he has, and that is done by the lessor. So lessor will make a periodic payment to lessee here, and on the terms, or rather on the basis that he is getting the rights which are actually owned by lessee. To give you an example, let's take the example of the car manufacturing company itself. So let's take an example. Here is a car manufacturing company XYZ Limited. Now, lessee is an automobile engineer, and he has a design of his own, and he approaches XYZ Limited. Now, when he approaches XYZ Limited, XYZ Limited, or rather XYZ Limited goes ahead and approves the design what lessee has. So, in this case, the relation between XYZ Limited and lessee is of lessee and lessor. lessee who has the design and lessor who is willing to use that design. Now, once this design is being used and the sales go on, so lessee will get the amount, or rather the design amount will be provided by XYZ Limited by default, because that is the design of this specific person. Without this design, the market wouldn't have been boomed, or rather the market wouldn't have seen this car at all. So he will be getting his fees. That is one preliminary part. However, on the other hand, lesser will also give him certain amount of sales that will happen every year. So every year, if the company is making 3,000 crores of sale, let's take 1% royalty is charged by the person who gave this design in the first place. So that amount, 1%, is called as royalty. The reason being, this name, or rather this legacy which has been born right now because of this design, has been actually done by the lessee and not by anyone else. Hence, he can claim an amount, and that amount which is being claimed is known as royalty. Now, there are different cases, or the other different case studies when it comes to royalty. We'll explain it one by one to you. So, we have mentioned the exact meaning of royalty. Royalty means a sum payable, generally based on output or sale. Whatever output is there or whatever sale is there, it is based on that amount. And this amount is paid to the owner of a mine, or to a patentee, or to an author, or to any such person who has vested his own rights for usage into someone else. So the person who is making the payment, he has got these rights from someone else, and hence he is making a payment based on the output or on the sale, and that payment is known as royalty. Now there are certain terminologies in this. Let's read them out. Now, the first terminology is the lease. Now, lease is an agreement between lessor and lessee, whereby lessor conveys the rights to the lessee who will be using the rights on behalf of the lessor, and there is an agreed sum of payment that he will receive as a part of the royalty. This is the first terminology. Now, the next terminology is minimum rent, which is also known as dead rent, rock rent, or fixed rent. That means this is the amount that the lessor is supposed to pay, or rather, this is the amount the lessor is supposed to receive from the lessee for the amount or for the usage of the rights. No matter whether the usage is happening or not, if the rights are given to him, this is the minimum amount that he's supposed to receive by all means. Now, when we talk about minimum rent, there are two cases that we need to understand here. Let's write them down. Now, when it comes to minimum rent or fixed rent, there are two cases. The first is when the actual royalty is less than minimum rent. That means whatever royalty is supposed to receive is less than minimum rent. Then, in such case, the lessor will claim the minimum rent itself, and he won't look for the royalty. Now, the second case where the actual royalty is more than minimum rent, then in such case, whichever is higher, that means actual royalty will be taken care of. That means actual royalty will be claimed by the lessor. So in any year, these two parameters will be checked by the lessor, and if the actual royalty is more, then he will claim that. If the minimum rent is more, then he will claim that in any of the year. However, minimum rent or minimum rent stands to be equivalent, or it can be equivalent for all the years. It depends on actual royalty, whether it is going up or going down, depending on the output, depending on the sale. However, minimum rent is something that has to be paid off. So in case if you're thinking that minimum rent can or cannot be paid off, that is wrong, because minimum rent has to be paid off. The only variable factor here is the actual royalty. If it goes up above minimum rent, then the lessor will claim that. If it goes down below minimum rent, then the minimum rent has to be paid. So it's that case. Let's go to the next terminology here. The next terminology that we have to discuss is the short working. Now, short working basically means that excess of minimum rent over actual royalty. That means the sales have gone down, the output is down, and hence there is no royalty, or rather the actual royalty is less than as compared to the minimum rent. Hence, here short working refers to minimum rent being more than actual royalty. Now, the last terminology is recoupment of short working. This is nothing but the right to carry forward or set off the loss, or rather the shortcomings or short workings over the minimum rent or over the royalty in the subsequent years. That means if you are shortcoming, or if there is shortcoming of 10,000 amount, that can be carried forward and that can be given in the next year, or that can be written off against any royalty that is coming up additionally in the next few years. So that is recoupment of short working. There are two cases here whereby you have a fixed right and you have a floating right. So if you have a fixed right, that means the lessor is promising the lessee to take over the loss, or rather to burden, or rather to take over that much of loss for any 1 year or for a fixed period of time. That means if I say for the next 2 years I'll take over the loss, or rather I'll consider that loss, or I'll take over whatever burden is there, I'll share that burden with you, then in that case that is a fixed right. On the other hand, if there is a floating right, that means in that case, the lessor is promising the lessee. That means wherever in the next 3 years, any 1 year, I'll take care of the loss. Rest 2 years, you have to take care. That means if there is a fixed right, there is a fixed time period. If there is a floating right, there will be any 1 year out of 2 to 3 years, or 4 to 5 years, any 1 year, I'll be taking care of it. Rest everything you have to take care. So that means any 1 year I can let off the minimum rent or royalty, whichever is smaller, I'll take care of it. But on the other hand, if short working is there, then I'll claim the minimum rent, or whichever is higher, I'll claim that thing. That is the conveyed, or that is the message that is conveyed when it comes to recoupment of short working. So this is what we had to explain you when it comes to the explanation of, or rather introduction to royalties and their terminologies. So thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned with Ekeeda and keep subscribing to Ekeeda.